you very much. I'll try to be as brief as possible on the request of the organizers. Firstly, many of the sentiments that I wish to express have already been expressed, so I will try not to go there except to elaborate if necessary. Obviously, this discussion has been organized in view of the recent attacks and targeting of the Muslim community. Although the topic is described as religion, reconciliation and the future, which I think is a good topic, because if we look at it as Sri Lankans, where are we going to go? We have just come out of a 30-year-old war. Is this the way to go, or is this not the way to go? Basically, the conflict that raged in this country for 30 years was about issues of justice. The Tamil people felt that they were not treated justly. The fact that the LTT adopted the wrong method to resolve those issues does not detract from the fact that the Tamil people had perceptions. In my view, some were real, some were not so real, but they had perceptions of injustice. Now today, those who are targeting the Muslims, particularly organizations like the Bodhubala Sena, are saying that the Buddhists have issues and they have concerns and they have issues of justice. And that is perfectly fine, because any community has the right to express themselves and to get the state to address those concerns and get them sorted out. But the whole question is the methodology that is adopted. The mere fact that the Tamil people had grievances did not in any way justify the LTT adopting a path of terrorism. And in the same way, the mere fact that the Buddhists have perceptions of injustice, real, maybe some not so real, but they have perceptions of injustice. The way to address it is to address the state. After all, the state, as one of the speakers said, is the authority that is bound to look after all its people. The way to go forward is not to have meetings in towns all over the country targeting Muslims or targeting any one community and creating insecurities in the minds of the people, and start a course of action which we may not be able to control. And we don't have to go far to see that, because last week, or I think week before, the Bodhubala Sena had a meeting in Kandy. And if you read the newspapers, particularly the Sinhalese newspapers, or heard the TV, you know what exactly they said. And they specifically mentioned both the fashion bug, they mentioned no limit. On Thursday, there was an attack on fashion bug. And they say, no, we didn't do it, we are not responsible. If we take them at their word, it is more serious, because that is precisely the point, that once you start a course of action, there are others to come in and take it on a path that we cannot control. That happened in a larger arena, when the Tamil political parties created expectations among youth and created a force which finally came and engulfed those Tamil political leaders. It happened, unfortunately, in the case of Mr. S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike. It happened in 1983 when J.R. Jayawardena. So the lesson for us is that as a country, we need to know how to resolve our differences. We may all have prejudices against each other, and as I think Bishop Chikera said, that in a multi-ethnic society, there are bound to be issues. But the test of the nation, the test of the country, is how we manage that in a civilized way. Together with the issue of justice is the issue of rule of law. Now, the rule of law is important to every citizen in the country, but it is more important to the marginalized, the small man, because only if the rule of law exists, he can go to institutions which look after and implement the rule of law without fear or favor. But if those institutions are broken, if there is an issue of credibility, then there is a problem. And minorities, by virtue of the fact that they are minorities in the sense of numbers, are at the receiving end. Today we are talking about reconciliation. Actually, we are only talking, in my view, we are not doing much about it. There are some very basic things which can be done very quickly, but it is not being done. But the danger for Sri Lanka as a country is that when you have a set of disgruntled people, disgruntled groups of people, how are they going to pull their weight to face international challenges, the whole economic struggle in the world, to build our country? How are we going to do that? We need every person, every community to put their shoulders to the wheel. But then you are not inspiring them. If the state is not giving them justice, how do you inspire people to give off their best? I want to just mention one thing about rising from what Malinda said. I agree with him that these small groups should not, for the sins of a small group, if you can call it sins, you don't let the whole community suffer. He mentioned the fact, this business of some Muslims supporting Pakistan when they play cricket. That is a very small group of people, but you should not therefore blame the whole Muslim community for that. Now, within the Muslim community, there are people who have issues about whether Pakistan should be playing cricket on a Friday instead of going to mosque and so on. So there are internal debates, but leave that, be that as it may. But what about the LTT? Do we blame the entire Tamil community because of what the LTT did? Do we blame the entire Buddhist community because of what Bodubala Sena is doing? No. In fact, the Buddhist tradition, if I may call it, is something which as Sri Lankans we can be proud, because we were an example to the whole world, an example in moderation. But now there are people, small groups, whose power or their voice is far larger in proportion to whom they represent. But the forces that they represent, particularly business forces, there is no doubt in my mind at all that one of the reasons that the Bodubala Sena is going, you see how the targeting of the Muslims is. Targeting their religious practices, because they know that for the Muslims, religion is very close to their heart. And targeting the businesses, because that is what the Muslims excel. I mean, if they are getting some undue advantage, then you need to adjust. The state has to intervene and so on. But this should be a level playing field. And all sorts of untruths, half-truths are being eminent. I am not going to go into that because we know this. But I want to end with one story from Islamic history, which may give us an indication of the approach that we should take in a country which is a multi-ethnic country. The first 30 years after the Prophet Muhammad are considered as the best representation of true Islam, both in theory and in practice. And during those 30 years, there were 4 caliphs who are known as the 4 great caliphs. And the second caliph, Omar, whom many people say was the greatest, was invited by the Bishop of Jerusalem to visit Jerusalem. So when he went to Jerusalem, the bishop was taking him around the church and showing him the place. And the bishop, while he was doing that, the time came for the caliph to say one of his 5 times prayers. So he told the bishop, excuse me, just give me 2-3 minutes, I will say my prayers and come. So the bishop invited him and said, most certainly you can say your prayers here. So the bishop said, no, I will not say my, the caliph said, no, I won't say my prayers here. And he went a fair distance away and said his prayers and came back. So when he came back, the bishop was puzzled. He asked him, why did you not pray here? I invited you, I allowed you to. He said, no, I did not want to do that. But because I did not want to give the wrong signal. Because if I pray here today, 100 or 500 years later, some Muslims might claim that because I prayed here, this mosque belongs to the Muslims. The point is that he was thinking far ahead, trying to avoid situations, thinking for the others. And I think that is the spirit we need in this country. We need, as our bishop said, and I have also written about this many times, and I'm happy that Member of Parliament Sumandiran is here. I notice, if I may say so, he is one of the exceptions to this rule. Tamil and Muslim politicians do not speak in Parliament about national issues. They only speak about the community. Now, as minority members, as minorities, we cannot ask for equal rights unless we also behave like equal shareholders. If Sri Lanka does well, if the economic problems have to be solved, if the foreign policy challenges have to be met, it is something which must affect and concern all of us, not only the Sinhalese, the majority, or the government. We may have differences as to how it is being done, but it is a duty of every Sri Lankan to have a say. And that is why I say that the minorities must not only demand equal rights, but we must also act as equal shareholders. Thank you.